Today's guest is Alexa Choi. She is a Chief Operating Officer for G2 Exchange, which is a growth tool for government and contractors, which we'll hear more about. And Alexa and I interact in the kind of the DC area and the GovCon community. And I finally convinced her to come on the podcast. So thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, Jeremy. It's been sitting in the back of my mind for the past few months, and I'm like, okay, grab your calendar, wrangle it, and make this happen. So I'm super happy to be here finally.
So for those who haven't met you at an event and chatted with you, talk about where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Okay, what do I do? So I'm Chief Operating Officer of G2X, which means I kind of make sure things are running smoothly, the different teams, our go-to-market, our growth platform, kind of like where we're going and how do we get there. A lot of strategy, a lot of working with the CEO, a lot of kind of like big picture thinking, but then being able to dive in tactically to make sure that little problems are solved so they don't become bigger problems. That kind of thing. It's been a lot of fun, actually. We can talk more about that later. But then a little bit about me. I think we spent like a good 30 minutes talking about sci-fi and fantasy. Turns out we're both kind of dorks about that, which is awesome. And I also really enjoy being outside. I drive a Jeep Wrangler, do the Jeep Wave thing, all of that. Like I'm very deep in that whole thing. I love the concept of branding and what it means to build a personal brand and a company brand. And as branding and like a personal brand relates to community. And so like the whole Jeep brand and the community that it built is like, it's just super awesome.
Yeah, well, so let's wind the clock back a little and let's talk about how did you know what you wanted to do as you were coming out of high school?
That's such a funny question. Like, does anybody really know what they want to do when they're coming out of high school? I don't know. I just wanted to not get arrested every day. That's pretty much was my goal at that point in time. I was kind of like a bad kid that grew up in the 90s. And I like my brother would probably really laugh a lot telling you that I almost got kicked out of high school for tagging up the girls' bathroom with like our gang names. Like it was the 90s, right? Like that's how things were. You wanted to push boundaries and do things. But no, when I went to college, I started a 4-year degree, and I was a little bit like throwing it to the universe and saying, surprise me. Like I wasn't quite sure. And I did a couple steps forward, a couple steps back, thinking I knew what I wanted to do, but then I wasn't quite sure. But then once I really landed on teaching English, learning Japanese, I kind of went down a path. And once I got on that path, I didn't get off that path until I graduated with my master's degree and got back from a year in Japan. And so I thought that I was going to be an English teacher at the college level. That was kind of like what my whole like education prepared me to do.
Wow. And so then what was that first job coming out of your education?
Yeah, so when I first graduated, I actually remember the phone call. I was defending my master's thesis, which is a whole thing by itself. My brother called me and he was like, "Hey, Lex, hey, do you have a job?" And I was like, "No, dude, I'm trying to like do this master's degree thing." And he was like, "Well, have you ever thought about moving to, you know, DC?" I was like, living in Washington State. So I'm like, Washington to Washington? No, no, actually, no, I have not. That has not crossed my mind. Why? He was like, "Well, your nephew, whom you've never met, is now 2. And if you wanted to move over here and help take care of him, then I can go back to school, so, because then we wouldn't have to do the daycare thing. It would be so awesome." And I was like, yeah, okay. So I did. I moved from Washington State to Washington, D.C. to help my brother and his wife out with my nephew, who was 2. And now my nephew is such a sweet baby. He's 20 and he's getting his pilot's license. And it was a long time ago. But yeah, that's why I moved here. And I was actually teaching English at a small university around the way here and also teaching at the community colleges a little bit and kind of getting my foot in the door with that whole industry until I put my resume on Monster and a company called Input, which was the predecessor to GovWin, called me like the next day and tried to interview me for an account management position, which I don't think I'd ever even heard those two words put together before. So I was like, I mean, I'm going to interview. I don't know what they're going to talk to me about. And that, I interviewed for it, I took that role, and that sort of put me on the path of government contracting.
Wow. And so what did you think of that? I mean, that's a pretty major transition, right? You're going from the world of
Mm-hmm.
education to the world of government contractors. How did that transition work for you?
Well, it's a really fascinating question. I don't think anybody's asked me that in quite that way. But I'm a very passionately curious person. I mean, you live in the Herndon Tech Corridor area, Tyson's and McLean. You're driving past all these companies and you're seeing the names of them on. And I was just like, I can't live here and not know what these companies do. Like, I just felt like I had a mission to find out. And then when you're an account manager, one thing that you don't know is that, you get to find out.
Right.
Because, I held books of hundreds of accounts and it was my job to upsell, renew, and, keep the business and make sure that folks knew how to use the system. And it was a really great entryway into government contracting because it was really basically like federal contracting university.
Hmm. Wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's not the typical path, right? A lot of people come in through like the BD realm,
Yeah.
proposal. Somebody's got to write all those proposals. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty unique take. And then how have you kind of navigated that career? I mean, have you been pretty choosy about the companies you work for?
Yeah, you know what? I'm such a victim of opportunity. So really, I was at Input for 5.5 years. And I was there when they were purchased by Deltec. And which, then they flipped the name into GovWin. But Deltec was my customer. They were in my account, in my account book. And I knew from having dealt with them for so many years what kind of company it was. And I was like, mm. So, I mean, I'm nothing against them. It's just that I was wanting to try something bigger, something new. And one of my really good friends at the company, his name is Vaj, and he was like, "Hey, I just took a job at BGov. Come work with me." And I was like, "You know what? It's a direct competitor. Like, I'm not really like that." And back then, there wasn't very many companies that were competing in that space. So it felt like a real personal affront to just like go to a direct competitor.
Hmm.
But like I said, a victim of circumstance. So I went to the interview and I'm really easily swayed by passion. And so, I met with this guy who now is the CEO of Pluralsight. His name's Chris Walters. And he's such a charismatic, just like super passionate about what he was doing. And I was like, oh, I have to work for him. This is awesome. So, I did go from Input over to BGov, but my two roles were very different. So I was an account manager, and then at BGov, for the first time in my life, I was like bag carrying, quota carrying, frontline salesperson. But the role was not really just sales because Vaj was the product owner of
Hmm.
BGov. So I would go out and demo all the customers, bring the feedback back, sit with Vaj, and then we would groom the backlog and start implementing customer feedback. So then that's how I got to learn about software development, what a backlog was, what Scrum was, like all of those different things, which I had never been exposed to before in my life.
Wow. So then what eventually brought you to Gov2 Exchange?
Oh, G2 Exchange. Yeah.
Gov2.
So yeah, that's a good. So okay, after I had done that job, I felt like I'd been consulting on BD and Capture for almost 10 years at that point, for like 7, 8 years. And I was like, you know what I should do? I should probably go try to do the job that I've been telling people how to do for all this time. So I took a job working for a company called Technique, and they were a small, brand new 8A company that had their CMMI level 3 certs for services
Hmm.
and dev, and they had like everything lined up. Like I felt like they were ready to really take a run at the market. And so I remember the owners were friends of mine kind of outside of work. And so they were like, please, if you ever want to leave Biga, please just give us the first conversation. And you're going to notice this is a theme that comes up for me a lot. So I said, okay. And so when I was looking to leave BGov, I was like, hey guys, you guys are a lot closer to my house. I was commuting like from South Riding to DC every day, and it was just painful. So they were in Herndon, and I went in there, one conversation, they got me an offer, I accepted it. And then I spent almost their entire 8A with them. So I did BD, capture, recruiting, operations. So it was like a win and close and how do they say that? Capture people have a fun way of putting this. It's like you close and run the project as
Ah,
well. So you have to staff it, you have to do all the things. So I had a really dynamic role there where the only thing I didn't do was really write proposals or do pricing, but pretty much everything else, or HR. We had a wonderful HR person who's still there who did that job. But then after that time happened, I went to G2X for the first time. This is my second time at G2X.
ah.
So G2X was looking for somebody that had the background of actually having done the job, but then also having that background of kind of like market intelligence. And the combination of those two things, there's not a Venn diagram of people that have those two things. There's not a lot of us out there. So I went to G2X the first time, but G2X was really, I don't think they were ready for me and I wasn't ready for them at that point in time, if that makes sense. So While I was at Technique, I was a non-technical scrum master for a $300 million big project. And so I
Wow.
was scaling people up, scaling people down, hiring, making sure everything was going correct, and making sure that our office space was good, making sure not non-technical scrum master is pretty much the best way of putting it. Making sure the project was working the way it was needed to work. I was on site all the time. But that means I was also meeting other business owners. So I ended up meeting the folks who own MetaPhase, Brett and Fred there on site. And I really liked those guys right from the beginning. And so when I was leaving G2X the first time, I just gave Brett a heads up, was like, hey, I think this G2X ship might be sinking. I'm thinking about something else. He was like, oh my God, let me get you an offer by Friday. And so I went from G2X to be a VP over there for a couple of years. And then, yeah, the G2X folks convinced me to come back and run it out. So here I am. That's
Well,
a long story.
I think you raise a good point, though. I mean, there are phases in a company, right?
Yes, yeah, yep.
And
Mhm.
sometimes that phase does not match with your skill set or your view of the world at the time, but sometimes later it does. And so
Right,
people should never like not consider a second opportunity if it comes about, if the right
right,
people are in place and
right,
good conversation happens. I mean,
right.
I've had that experience with people I've mentored in government jobs where they left an
Yeah,
agency because things were maybe there was some toxic leadership or there were just some
right,
challenges there, and the leadership changes and you're like, hey, that leadership's gone. The culture
right.
is from everybody else that's there now, as they're talking about how the culture has improved, you should give it another opportunity, right? And the same thing goes in the uh, industry sector, right? So
Yeah, actually, it's funny because when I left G2X, and talk about fail forward, right? I had a lot of thoughts that I had failed the organization or myself, or I don't know, like, because when I took the job, technique was very near and dear to my heart, having spent almost a decade there, and I thought if I'm going to leave for something, I want it to be something really exciting and something I'm going to stay a long time at, and so I was only there 9 months. So for it to not work out, not be the right fit, I felt like I didn't make the right choice,
hmm.
right? Like I didn't do my due diligence, which was probably true, honestly. Like I said, I'm easily talked into things from passion. That always worked for me, And so, but at the end of the day, what you said is so true. Like if it's not the right fit, it's okay. Like keep it moving, right? Find some place that you feel like is your tribe, and then find something you can build that's fun and cool. And then remember that, this life is really too short to do anything else.
That's so true. For a long time, I envied the legal profession because they kind of had this concept where you go to a firm, you try to become partner at a firm. If it doesn't look like it's going to work out, you just go to another firm and they congratulate you and they say, "Hey,
Right,
we're happy for you. Good luck on your next thing. And if you ever want to come back, come talk to us again." And they had this
right,
way of letting people float around and even come back because they learned
right,
whatever that person learned at their competitor or at some other firm.
right,
And for a long time, the information technology was not like that. It was
right.
very, if you leave us, you're disloyal,
Mm-hmm.
don't come back, we're slamming the door. But I don't think it's the same way. I think we've really adopted that free flowing attitude, especially within GovCon, right? All the contracting companies with the
Oh
GovCon, I see a
yeah.
lot of interbreeding, if you will, right, of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned this because VGov was like that. It's like if you leave, you can never come back. That's
Uh,
like they would actually tell you that on your way out your door, and you're like, okay, all right then. It's like
yeah,
that
it's
5-year-old that's like gets in their feelings and is like, I don't want to celebrate Christmas or New Year. And the mom is like, okay, so
yeah,
it's like you've already made the decision to leave. It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, like you said, you pointed it out that if you leave, you get more experiences and then you come back as a better addition to the team of talent, right?
yeah.
And I think with GovCon particularly, it's very, very competitive. And that was a growth opportunity for me early on in my career was when I had people leave me. I would get so upset about it. I'd be like, oh my, especially when they got insourced to the government, I would
Mm,
be like, I worked so hard to bring this person on. You're going to hire them? And but then over time, I'm like, okay, they're not here to serve me. They're here to serve the mission. And
right.
if it makes more sense for them to do it on that side, it's okay. But these are all I feel like a lot of my epiphanies were like 40 plus epiphanies, you know. So if you're in
Hmm.
your 20s or your 30s, just wait till you hit your 40s and things make a lot more sense.
I like to look at it as I had somebody who works for me or worked with me, and then they chose to go someplace else. They could become my advocate at that place, right? Because
Exactly.
as long as we didn't treat them poorly, the reason they left wasn't because we treated them poorly. It was because they had a better fit or an opportunity for a promotion or,
Yeah.
whatever. And I want to celebrate that. And then now I want you to also say, yeah, but I loved working there, right? Give us
Yeah.
good press with other people.
And you know what? That happens a lot with me. I mean, I have a little bit of a platform in GovCon, so I get hit up a lot, and people ask me all of the time, what do you think about like technique? What do you think about metaphase? What do you think about BGov? Like all these different questions. And when it comes to these folks that I've worked with, I've got nothing but good things to say. And who to talk to and what to talk to them about and how
Yeah.
to have the conversation. And so I think that that's absolutely true. You can actually sometimes be more of an advocate from the outside than you ever
Mm,
could have from the inside.
that's so true. So Alexa, as you're looking back at your career, what's something you go, man, I wish we did that differently. And I'll make sure we say it's not something that we're saying is wrong necessarily, although it could be, but something that could be improved, have some efficiency gained. And it's not something you and I are going to necessarily fix or
Right.
solve or improve right now, right? But looking back, what's some things that you think, or could be more than one thing that you think we should kind of reconsider?
So I'm kind of between two different ones after you kind of prep me for this question a little bit. And the first one is I think we should encourage younger people to get good at math.
Mm,
Because I think our age and even like the millennials in general and the younger Gen Xers, like math wasn't cool,
yeah,
and it was also hard, so we didn't do it.
that's
And
right.
so I think that if we would have been more encouraged at math and how math impacts the world around us, I think we would probably be stronger technologists.
Mm,
And I'm even like a bubble technologist. Like I'm not like a hands-on coder. I do a lot of designing of stuff because I'm an end user of tools, but I don't, put hands on keyboard and code stuff. But now that AI is here, I think that if our generation was better at math, we would be better technologists. That's the answer to that thing. And then the other thing I was going to say is that I think we need to really implement effective communication skills early on in people's careers because 9.9 times out of 10 when I see things fail, it's not a talent thing, it's not a personality thing, it's because people didn't communicate.
yeah. Wow. Those are both so, so good. I'm with you on the math thing. I'm the guy who shopped around for colleges to get the least math requirement possible for a computer science degree. And I'll tell you, it was algebra two. I didn't have to go any higher than algebra two. And I regret that because there's so many things I do today in Excel, in
Yes.
forecasting, and trying to figure out what our costs are that I would be better at if I had a better foundation in math. And I've had to learn, at my age, go back and learn math, which is sad at times. But
Well,
I also,
it's actually exciting, right? Because math is everything. Math is energy. Math is
yeah,
like everything is math, but you don't realize that until you're like way later in your career and you're like, ah,
that's right. And remind me what the second one was.
oh, it was effective
Oh,
communication
that's right.
skills.
Oh,
Mhm.
and I could not emphasize that enough, right? The
Yeah.
number of things I equally have seen from the government side in government projects that have failed, organizations that have failed because they don't want to work, they don't communicate and work together, and nobody knows what the other side is doing. Yeah,
I just laugh. I just laugh. I was like, I always, whenever something like really falls on its face, I'm always like running back the playbook. Like, okay, where did things start to fall off the train?
yeah,
And it's usually in the beginning without, not thinking about the end and working backwards and just really having no clue about what good looks like, right? Or what the
mm,
definition of done is, right? And so,
yeah.
you know, um,
And then telling everybody what that is, right? In a way that makes sense, and it's not just vague and
right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And getting
absolutely.
people on board and getting some social capital behind it and like
Right.
all these things that like communication and people think it's like, oh, being able to stand up and and command a room. And I guess that's part of it, but also you have to be relatable at the same time, or nobody's going to listen to you. Everybody has
That's
a phone, everybody gets distracted with it, and so you have to really make it more personable, and you make sure you get people on board. Because I always hear like, if you're a leader and you look behind you and there's nobody there, you're just taking a walk. You're not a leader.
that's
That's
right.
and so I always think about that when I'm talking to my folks that report to me or work with me. I'm always thinking like, okay, how am I being received? Like, I could be talking all I want, but are they hearing me? Am I
Mm.
effectively communicating what I need so that way we can give them what they need to do their jobs?
Yeah, we need more of that. And you're right, we need that earlier in people's
Yeah,
careers
earlier,
so they
earlier.
learn as a habit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I didn't have to learn it by getting asked to leave an organization.
Right, right. Project failure or whatnot.
Yeah.
So what's coming up for you here in the near future, Alexa?
Well, I'm really excited because G2X has a lot that we're launching this year. We are launching our Capture Suite, which is full opportunities, full awards, plus a pipeline building tool. So you could effectively go in and find an opportunity, put it in a pipeline, track it throughout its life of stages, and tag different people in it, and all those kinds of things. I think up until now, G2X has really been a little bit of a newsletter, right? And so we're taking those really painful steps to go from being a newsletter into being a full on SaaS growth tool suite. And to go from here to here is a big shift in transition. We've implemented a lot of AI tools. We're also looking at building out and implementing a AI talent tool
Hmm.
where folks can upload their resumes and AI will read it and look at the position you would like to apply for and be like, based on what you're looking to do, your resume needs to be changed these different ways. And then you can upload a statement of work from the government and spit out key personnel job descriptions and then just start matching talent using AI. So that's probably one of the more cool things we're looking to do. And I haven't seen a tool out there like that for government contracting. So I'm excited about those two things.
That's so funny. I've been waiting for a tool like that. I think consuming statements of work and
Right.
producing proposals even that are more customized than even the way we do templates. I was in industry for a while, and we'd have our templates with our
Yeah.
boilerplate
Yeah.
information, and there's got to be
Yeah.
better ways to do all of that, especially, and
Yeah.
I like that. Matching key personnel. That's a really great
Yeah.
idea.
And it's funny that you said boilerplate because I have like I have like a weird issue where there's like a couple of words that I hate and I have no reason to hate them, but boilerplate is one of them. I'm like, or like the word errands, like when somebody's
Oh.
like, oh, I'm gonna go run errands, like that doesn't actually tell me anything. Like, what are you actually gonna go do? And then like boilerplate, it doesn't mean anything. It just means
Right.
that you pulled something that you repeatedly use. But if you repeatedly use it, how are you using it for this very specific proposal of which you should probably not be using boilerplate? But
Yeah.
the whole acquisition proposal bot thing is really fascinating. We do have one at G2X and it is embedded in the product suite. But ours is a little bit different that we don't ask you to upload your own past performance and train the models against it because we felt like that's something that we still were trying to wrap our heads around security wise. Like
Hmm.
you upload the government stuff and it's going to build you a light pink team draft and you can go from there. But we didn't want to, have you upload your stuff and have it all living somewhere else, probably a data center in Ashburn. We kind of wanted it to just build that generic outline so then you could take that and then go from pink to red faster. But this is an area I think where the industry is moving so fast.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with you on boilerplate, right? I was saying that almost negatively because
Yeah,
I
I
did
know.
so many proposals and I
You're just
read a
like,
lot of
oh
proposals
God.
on the government side and they're like, oh, these
Yeah.
all sound the same. It
Yeah.
would be very interesting to teach people to write better past performance history and or how to explain what their company does better than the way they do it today. Um,
And then you're going back to that effective communication
yep,
because that means I remember one time at Technique, we had a contract with NASA and the one of the co-owners and I flew down there to NASA and Kennedy Space Center and we sat with the project leads for every single one of the work streams and we interviewed them. We're like, okay, tell us about your job, right? And actually doing that was so inspiring because the jobs were actually really cool.
that's awesome.
And I was like, man, there's no other contract as cool as this particular contract. But that being able to interview the folks on the ground, take what they say and turn it into a proposal is probably a skill set that a machine, I wouldn't rely on a machine to do. It's probably a human in the loop thing.
Hmm. Not that Gen AI can't help you write better words than you write today.
That's probably true.
But certainly the structure and the
Yeah.
flow and the feel, like I'm a big AI proponent. I think Gen AI is
Oh
going to
yeah.
have the ability to solve all kinds of problems. And at the same time, it's going to generate a whole bunch of problems because
Oh
I'm not
yeah.
going to trust that content, right? So at the end of the day, it's always going to require me to go through that content and go, is this what I really am trying to say?
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. I like the way that you put that. It's gonna solve a lot of problems and it's gonna cause a lot of problems. Like most innovation, right?
That's right.
Honestly. Oh, by the way, my shirt says Maverick and Goose.
Awesome.
Just
That's
bring back that love and feeling. Yeah, I love Top Gun.
that's awesome. Well, Alexa, I want to thank you so much for coming on the
Yep.
podcast. You are a
Yep.
breath of fresh air and an exciting person to interact with, and I can't wait to see you in the community here soon. And look forward to seeing how things work out with your suite.
No, I appreciate it so much. I hope you have a great day, Jeremy, and I'll see you at GovJam.